welcome back. All right, so what I want to deal with now is the double diamond. Now, you may have heard me talk about the fact that design is not a linear process, but the design thinking discipline still does have a process associated to it. It's just not pinned, there's not a stake in the ground around certain of the tools and techniques that you actually utilize. So there's not A plus B equals C. There is, well, as we understand more about the problem, here's a bucket of tools that we can use as we go through it. As we understand more about the problem, here are some of the skill sets that we can draw upon in order to discover it. As we understand more about the problem, well, here are the knowledge sets that we can leverage and the heuristics that we've extracted so we can actually understand the problem better. Right up until and mindset changes that we need to facilitate. So really the journey through design is actually in itself a journey of discovery, even of your own team's capabilities and your own thinking capabilities. You've got to get away from this thing of thinking that we need to have all the right answers, we need to know all the right tools and all the techniques that we need to use. That's a flawed approach. The point of design is that it's not a fail fast, but a learn fast technique. So although I'm going to show you a method or a technique, all right, remember it's not set in stone. Okay, so you may have heard of the thing called the double diamond, invented by the UK Design Council. Now, is that a good double diamond? I think it is. Now, a couple of things here from this double diamond. All right, there's a couple of phases. All right, at this stage here, you have what is referred to as the discover phase. I'll elaborate further on that. But then we have the define. We then have develop, and finally we have deliver. Now there's a pre-stage here which we've added and we called it prepare, and there's a follow-on stage here which is almost a launch / commercialize, depending upon the size of your organization, could be planning or that type of stuff. So really, you can see there's a process of divergence and convergence that occurs here. So in the discover phase, it's divergent, which means we don't actually know what the problem is. Now that's an important point to emphasize. You know, you only discover what the problem is over here. All right. So in the beginning here, we like to call this more of a challenge space. In other words, we don't really know what the problem is, but we know something over there just ain't right. All right, smells funny. Right, and it's this unknown problem area, so it's a complex sort of space, and we think that we can solve it somehow. We just need to get the right minds in the room together. Well, that's a classic space candidate for the discovery phase, and I'm actually going to show you a couple of questions that you can effectively work through to determine, well, is this a design problem or is this an analytical problem? Okay. So really up top here is the challenge space, and this is where we like frame the challenge and we say, well how broad is this? Are we looking to solve crime, all right, fourth order type thing? Or are we looking to optimize interactions between people as they approach an ATM people as they approach the teller at a bank? Or are we actually looking at how they approach an ATM or an object or a device or all the rest of that as we spoke about the fourth order type of challenges? So really that's when you do the framing of the challenge space. But then what you do is you produce a research plan, which we'll elaborate on a little further. So the research plan says, all right, well, that's what we have to achieve. This is the framing of the space. What are the people that we need to interact with? What is the research question? What are we actually trying to discover? What are the questions we want to ask people? What are the participatory tools that we want to use? What are the observation tools that we want to actually use? And what are the ask type of tools we actually want to use? So this is where you set what's referred to as the research plan. And you sit down and you workshop it together, you kind of get an idea of how each tool is used, and out you go and you effectively conduct your research plan. And you want to try and do your first iteration pretty quickly. So you can get through this entire double diamond in about 2 weeks. Less than that, I've done workshops of 2 days actually. But it's this front section that takes quite a bit, but you've got to gather all that information. Now in this discover phase, this is the ethnographic area. Okay, so this is where we do the ethnographic studies. We look at human behavior, we try and understand what makes them tick in this area off the back of that research plan. And you know, there's things like a diary study, shadowing, day in the life of, all of these types of techniques that you can actually use in order to try and understand more about the humans that you're effectively interacting with and that you want to acquire your product or your service. Now, once you get to a particular point in which you set yourself a cutoff, you think you have enough information, you move over into the define phase. And really in the define phase, as I've said, right, we take all the pieces that we've acquired, and we have them and we call them data points. And from all those data points, we extract a series of insights. And from those insights, there's a few techniques that we come up with to figure out what the problem might be. And we get to the point in which we say, all right, how might we question? In other words, in light of all of this research, look what we've identified here. There's a contradiction between these two bits of information. Why was this person going over here, right, but they could have done it online? Something doesn't make sense. There's a sort of connection point. Oh, look, this person did this online and they did this over here, and this is one of our competitors. Why have they done that? All right, so this is the point, is we're trying to understand that behavior, and we ask those questions, and those are what we do to extract the insights. Based upon that insights, we start to figure out what the problem space actually might look like, and then within that problem space, what do we actually want to solve within that problem area. And also in here, we devise a series of design principles, all right, which really are going to guide us as we progress through the design cycle, and what we're going to test against every time we iterate. By the way, up top here, you would have documented a series of assumptions that you would also test against. Now that you have a how might we question, you move into the develop stage. And this is really where you ideate. Okay? And this is around a whole bunch of techniques around, well, how can we actually validate the ideas, or ideate around solving this particular how might we question. Remember, that's the piece that we're going to focus on. All right, so what we're doing is you're ideating around concepts, all right, and you're testing. You're ideating and you're testing. You're ideating and you're testing. You're ideating and you're testing. So this is where you're actually now taking all of your ideas, but you must have you must have something to test it against, and you're testing it against the next level up, your design principles. Things like goals and strategies, by the way, are also injected in here at this top level, and you can even go right back and test it against your assumptions. So ideation. Remember, it's not about fail fast around testing your ideas out. It's about learn fast. So prototyping is about learning fast, and that's what we do here in the ideation phase. All right, we're actually prototyping as well. And when we get to a particular point that we're comfortable with our validated concept and idea and validated prototype, we get into the delivery stage, all right, and this is where we figure out, all right, how are we going to pitch this? Let me change color in that. How are we actually going to launch it? What does it look like? What are the feasibility and viability aspects? How are we going to make money from it? What's the marketing plan to launch it? And we do what are referred to as learning launches. Do like media releases, and we plan the onboarding process of customers onto this product and onto this service. All of those things really occur here within the delivery phase, ultimately leading into a commercialization or a full launch. Now, all of this is iterative. This isn't linear. It's not all the way through here. I'm going to get messy now, because ultimately this is what's happening. You're going through that process. And also, depending upon what you discover through this cycle, you're also doing this backwards and forwards, and you go backwards and forwards here, testing and validating, backwards and forwards, and you can go back this way. So this is the point, and that's why design is sometimes referred to as a messy discipline, but that's exactly it. It's messy. We don't know what the problem is, and we're testing all the time. We're testing, and we're testing it with prototypes so that we can learn effectively from our customers. All right, so this is now the double diamond process. This is effectively what we have to work through within in the next couple of weeks as you move through these stages, and ultimately arriving at something that is viable, desirable, and feasible on the side. And if you recall, we drew those three lenses that look like that. So we want to get to the point where we can identify the overlap of those three in the middle. So there's your double diamond. See you later.